All right, so our session is being recorded. So welcome. Please note that this session is being recorded. You are welcome to have your camera on. We encourage you to do that if you are comfortable with that. Love to see your face, not required, of course. Please be sure to mute yourself though. This webinar will be 1 hour. If you have any questions for our participants during that time, you can put them in the chat. And we'll encourage that and discuss, any discussion that you have during the time of the session. Please feel free to have active discussion during this session. Most of our panelists and attendees are joining the session from their homes, as you can imagine. So please welcome and be patient with any pets or family members who inadvertently join our discussion today. And to start our session, I'd like to actually ask Karen Loquet, the Chief Information Officer and Assistant Auditor-Controller at the county's Office of the Auditor-Controller, and executive sponsor of the county's Women in Tech Los Angeles program, to offer some opening remarks and share about the evolution of that program. And then we'll jump into our session today about why mentorship matters. So I'll hand over to Karen now.
Thank you, Rebecca. So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for joining our first mentorship panel series. We are expecting to have a future series coming along, but we appreciate you joining us today. So as Rebecca said, I am one of the founding members of Women in Tech Los Angeles. We started out really pre-COVID, somewhat around a board motion that came out around women in tech and hiring. And it has actually evolved over that time, this last 16 months or so that we've been in COVID. And so myself, along with other CIOs in the county and also other tech professionals, we actually came together really with a passion to transform women's roles in the area of STEM. So that's science, technology, engineering, and math, along with data science and really leadership, more importantly, leadership in LA County. So the vision for the Women in Tech is really to empower women to achieve endless possibilities and transformations in technology, leadership, and economic prosperity. And we're accomplishing that through 5 major goals. So the goals are around career growth, mentorship, which we're talking about today, workforce development. We have many partnerships, as you will see. We have many of our vendor partners and private and public partnerships throughout the county. We're leveraging them. We're also leveraging our outreach to our communities. So again, I want to thank you for joining us today. You can reach us at wit.lacounty.gov and see more information around new and exciting things that the WIT LA is going to be doing. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Karen. So, by way of making a note, because sometimes this question comes up, WIT is open to everyone at the county, and everyone is welcome. So it's nice to see so many faces on this call. You are all welcome here. So this panel discussion we're having today is bringing together women in technology leadership roles to discuss the value of mentorship, particularly for women in technology. So we're going to discuss some of the mentorship activities taking place at the county to support women in technology roles. Also, we'll talk about how you can seek mentorship yourself or offer mentorship to others. By way of some background, women outnumber men at almost every educational level and are about half the workforce in most countries, but only 24.5% of full-time computer science operations individuals nationally in those positions are occupied by women. The county actually exceeds the national rate at 28.78%. Some of you may, in leadership roles, may know that there are some challenges sort of tracking some of that data. So that's actually an additional challenge we face, but it's nice to see that the county does exceed some of those national rates. However, I think we're really not doing well enough yet. The good news is, though, that according to the National Science Foundation, the number of women getting their master's degree in computer sciences has risen over 39% in the past 25 years. And to support women in those roles that align with their goals and experience, mentorship is needed. I think there's no question about that. So studies have shown that employees with mentors are 5 times more likely to get promoted. And managerial productivity increases by 88% when mentoring was involved versus only 24% with training alone. So the people around you can either support or hinder your growth, of course, toward becoming the best leader you can be. So if you don't have access to the relationships essential to leadership success, you are missing out. And in fact, statistically speaking, many women leaders are missing out. So we're going to be talking about a lot of that today. We have a panel of individuals who span the private and public sectors, each who are supporting efforts in mentoring women in technology and mentoring in general. I'll start by quickly introducing our panelists so we can get straight to the content, and we'll let their experience speak for itself in our discussion. But by way of a quick icebreaker, which anyone who knows me knows that I can't pass up the opportunity for an icebreaker, I'm going to ask each one of our panelists as I introduce them to just quickly tell us what their first job was, because after all, we all started somewhere. So I will start with just alphabetical order here. Christina Koru, who's the Managing Director of the West Technology for Health and Public Sector with Accenture. So Christina, why don't you tell us what your first job was?
My first job was with the City of Woodland Parks and Recreation, working their summer programs as a recreation leader.
Public sector right from the start. Love that.
Right from the start.
All right. Mirian Avalos, who is the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Mental Health with LA County. Mirian, why don't you tell us what your first job was?
Sure. My first job was working in the private sector. I worked for a consulting firm.
In the baseball card.
Just a quick reminder for folks, as we are hearing some background noise, we're actually hearing someone's conversation. If you could mute yourself. I'm going to do a couple of quick mutes now. There we go. And Trinh Mack, who's the Assistant General Manager and she's with ISD, and ISD loves long titles. So Assistant General Manager, Customer Application Branch, known as CAB, with the Internal Services Department at LA County. Trinh, why don't you tell us your first job?
Yes, we do have long titles. My first job was working as an intern while I was at UCI, doing programming work for fleet services there at the UCI campus, programming in BASIC.
All right.
Wow.
Well, we love that. We have all the people coming out, the COBOL programmers, the BASIC programmers, all uniting. So Sharon Martin, last but not least, Systems Engineering Director with U.S. Public Sector West with Cisco. Why don't you share with us your first job?
Sure. Thank you, Rebecca. Trinh was out in front, that's for sure. My first job was when I was 14. I worked at a local retirement home senior living facility, and I served meals to seniors that were living there.
Of offering service to others. So thank you. All right, well, welcome to all of our panelists and to our attendees. We're having a great turnout. I'm loving to see more and more participants joining the call. So we'll jump into it now. So we'll start with foundational about mentorship, why it matters. We talked a little bit about some statistics, and it's important to set the stage by providing some examples of how mentorship has been important to our panelists. So I'll start with Mirian. What formal or informal mentorship have you had throughout your education or career? And what programs have you looked at or developed within your own organization?
So I think, let me just say it this way, being a CIO in the public sector is a very lonely job. So I want to thank Karen for the leadership. I always call myself Karen's first follower. So, the theory of the first follower is that, you follow the leader, and she's, I appreciate all the work she's done in leading the effort of women in technology and in LA County. So for that, we're truly grateful for her work. And Rebecca, thank you for hosting this event and helping us along. So throughout my career, I've had the good fortune of having peer mentors.
And I think in the next year or so, those same things are going to be pretty prominent when
That's
it's
a lot of fans.
I think we're going to be tasked with
Grab someone else and mute them. There we go.
Okay, excellent, great.
I caught him.
I keep having voiceovers.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've had the good fortune of having peer mentors and in a lot of the roles that I would come into. And so my fellow CIOs or tech leaders have have really been my mentors to walk through the environments that the sectors that I've joined. So in that case, it's been really beneficial to form those relationships. They're not necessarily women mentors, but just peer mentors. And a lot of majority of them have been male mentors who've extended a hand and said, "Hey, you're new here. Let's help. You know, let's walk you through some of the important information in these particular sectors." So in that sense, I've had the good fortune of having the peer mentors, but also within I'm fairly new, obviously, to LA County. I've been here 4 years, but in other counties, I've joined a couple other counties. So being in different counties, being able to join those particular organizations, I've sought out the ability to be myself a mentor to up and coming women in technology and to sort of walk through their career paths and give them and make sure that they have the information available to move forward. So that's been really important. And so those are just some examples of that.
Yeah, and I think that brings up an important point that you can find mentorship within your own organization or even within, in this case, the county. But the value of people who have had similar roles can sometimes exceed that for people outside of your organization, right? To bring that perspective and bring you some historical context to their background and how they do things sometimes differently in other jurisdictions in that case. So I'm going to ask the same question to Sharon, who's with Cisco. I know, Sharon, that you've worked on some programs within the organizations that you've been part of. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit about how your role in developing mentorship programs has actually helped to support you as well.
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca, and Mirian, thanks for sharing your experience. Early on in my career, I'll share mentorship is something that I wish I had known about earlier. I think I could have navigated some situations more clearly if I'd had some guidance for myself. Asking for a raise or even understanding how promotions happened were, conversations I wasn't having probably for the first 10 years of my career. And that goes for men and women, I think, early in career. So, just having someone early on to just help guide you in some of the difficult conversations that might come up with your manager. I received my first leadership role about 10 years ago. And that's when I really got serious about building mentorship programs because mentorship and sponsorship did a lot for me. And so I've had a hand in architecting programs for, both leadership development to really help invest in and develop individual contributors that want to have a bigger impact, that want to lead larger organizations, as well as technical development programs that's all around the technology and furthering one's skills and furthering one's technical aptitude. With some of the trends that we're seeing in the industry right now, things like programmability skills. We always have to be, as technologists, out in front of what's coming. It's one of those careers where, every year we really have to reinvent our skill sets. So, technical mentorship is also incredibly important. I think I'll share one last comment and then hand it back to our moderator. I think when engaging in a mentorship, probably the number one thing I've learned is that the success of the relationship and the success of your growth really is owned by the mentee. You need to own the relationship. You need to own your growth. You need to own the communication through the mentorship relationship.
Yeah, that's certainly a good point. I like that you spoke about the sort of two pillars maybe of mentorship, the technical within the aspects of the roles that many of us hold, but also the kind of business skills type of mentorship, which also offers the opportunity to look at other roles within an organization and growth outside of what you are already doing within your work. So each of those aspects definitely important. And then to speak to our next point, I think this is a great lead in into what is already being done in some of these organizations to encourage mentorship. So I'm going to actually ask that question to Trinh Mack, who's with ISD. Trinh, you, and I saw you nodding your head when Sharon was talking about who should lead that mentorship and who should take the responsibility to maybe have some outreach, and that does fall on the mentee. So I know that you have some recent experience with launching a program. at ISD. And maybe you could talk us through how that went down, how that happened, and the process for it, and what you saw in terms of results.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thanks for this opportunity to be here. I think this is great. And this is really timely conversation for me because we're not just only just encouraging mentorship, we actually did one. So my executive team and I had been planning a mentorship program pre-COVID, and it was important to us. I remember when I came to the county, let me say this, 31 years ago, right out of college, we were all matched with an executive mentor. And I thought that was the best thing in the world. I got to have some face time with executives and, just seeing them as people, right? And so I thought that was really important. But it was short lived, but that experience stayed with me all these years, right? So when I was in an opportunity or had the opportunity to be in a position to do something about that, I said, let's bring that back, but more in a more formalized way, right? So we were planning this pre-COVID. We had selected 20 volunteer participants, 10 men, 10 women, 10 men, and matched them with an executive mentor. We had the program laid out. We had sets of topics and curriculum. We had a mentor training. We had mentee training also planned out. We had an initial kickoff session with everybody. And then, the pandemic hit. So obviously we're all across, the globe. We were all flying by the seats of our pants, obviously. So about 5 months into it, and I think as a kind of new normal was settling in, we all still felt like it was very much a priority for us to launch this mentorship program, just probably not as in person as we'd like it, right? So in September of last year, we did just that. And I kind of talked a little bit into how we did this. So we started the program in September. Our mentees had filled out a pre-program survey around things like how well they understood the organization and the roles and responsibilities at the next levels, what their intended career path is, and maybe where they fit in the organization, et cetera. So in the first session with their mentors, they also did an envelope exercise, right? So the original intent was to do a physical envelope where you would answer a couple of things around like what is your long-term career goal and objective, and what were the obstacles you thought were that were in front of you in terms of achieving those goals. So they would answer those things, put it in a sealed envelope, and then to be revealed later at the end of the program, again, what was their journey through the program and how their perspective changed from their answers, right? But of course, we couldn't do that because of pandemic. So we put it in a little virtual kind of email envelope, if you will. The mentees met with their mentors twice a month, and they discussed topics that were outlined in our framework. We had a mid-program touch point with all the mentees and all the mentors to check in on the progress and the general feelings about the program. We had opportunities where the mentors even presented on a topic of their choice and in front of a group, and they received personal feedback from the mentors, again, touching on a little bit on the soft skill side of what's required for that next level. And on the last session, the mentors wrapped it up with their mentees, and they would open up the envelope, if you will, and answer the two questions. Again, what were their long-term career goals and what they thought were obstacles to achieving those goals. And then there was a discussion around why did their perspective change, if it did, and there were discussions around that. And then February this past February, we had a big graduation, complete with graduation gifts and everything. And then the same survey that they filled out pre-program, we had them fill out post-program. And it helped us to measure how successful the program really was. And I think this is a really important part of any program is you got to have a way to measure its outcome. So we did that. So since then, we have expanded this same mentorship program to all of our IT groups in the ISD. We're talking, 1,100 people in our IT groups in ISD. So we expanded this particular program out to the rest. And I think they're having their graduation later this month as well. So while I think our mentorship program has been a success, I think it's really only a success if the mentees found value in it, and more importantly, it isn't just like a one and done deal, right? It has to be sustained, and it really has to be incorporated into the culture and the DNA of our organization. So we want to go back and look at what worked, what didn't, and what can be improved on. And more importantly, we're trying to see how we can connect our current mentees with our future mentees and kind of incorporating this concept into our next program. And so again, this should be kind of an iterative process, so it can be sustained. So our hope is that the mentees will be our current mentees will be our future mentors, right? So that's the goal. So if any one of you have any thoughts of forming your own mentorship, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd love to help wherever I can.
Yeah, thank you, Trinh, for offering that, and then also being available to discuss that framework that you put together. I think a couple of points that are important to highlight that you spoke about, not overcomplicating the process there. And we're going to talk a little bit about formal versus informal mentorship, especially the point where you're at now with carrying on these relationships. It doesn't have to be a formalized relationship anymore, but having that simple framework in place really allowed you to now have this as a scalable program. And 1,100 is certainly the biggest IT organization throughout the county. And so to be able to scale anything to that is remarkable. So congratulations on that. And also incredible to see that you've incorporated measurable outcomes and getting that feedback so you can see the success of the program. So now we are going to talk about that formal versus informal mentorship. I think this is an important one to talk about because when I've spoken, especially to younger professionals, and just ask them if they have someone who they consider a mentor, very few people will raise their hand. And oftentimes they will say they do if they are part of some formal mentorship program. That's the only way they can sort of identify that that person is their actual mentor. And I will say my own personal experience is that many of my mentors, I wonder if they even know they're my mentor, because I've never gone through the process of asking them, or and I sort of equate it to the sort of exchanging of halves of a best friend necklace, like, will you be my mentor? Will you be my best friend? And very rarely is that the case. So I want to next ask Christina your experience, and if you could share some of what you've benefited from in terms of formal and informal mentorship. I understand that you've had experiences with both, and if you see that same thing where you benefit as well from some of these informal ones just as much as formal programs.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks to Karen and Rebecca for starting this great organization at the county. I think it's wonderful that you saw a need, and instead of thinking what can we leverage, you looked at each other and said, well, why not us? Why can't we start it? And that's how a lot of good ideas take root. I have benefited from informal and formal mentorship programs. As early as graduate school, a suggestion was made to me to do informational interviews. And at the time, I really didn't think of it as a mentorship opportunity, but I just sought out, I thought, what are interesting jobs that are out there? I was getting a master's in education, and I would approach people on doing a 30-minute informational interview with me. And from that, often I would ask, what is your background? What job did you have before? Tell me about your current job, and can you name 3 other people that you would have me speak to? And I still encourage this, even, kids in college now, in your first job, if you happen to participate on a webinar of some sort and you think, wow, this person's really interesting, I'd really like to talk to them. I think people are really open to, something a little bit more formal where, in the workplace, you identify maybe 3 to 5 people that you think I'd really like to understand what they're doing and how they got there. And so I look at either informal or formal mentorship. The benefits of it are that you gain practical advice. You're learning from your peers. It increases your confidence, and you develop communication skills. The most important thing that I have taken away from informal and formal mentorships is development of what I would call soft skills. And soft skills are things like the way that you enter a room, your body language. I tend to be a person that's very animated. I can never play poker because you can read on my face exactly what my cards are. And there is an art to that. And especially, I think, for women, when we walk into a room and we're in meetings. And so through these informal and formal mentorship programs, I was able to get some feedback on some of these critical areas that really, I think, helped me develop, and then in turn have helped me develop other leaders. There's also executive coaching that's out there. It can be expensive, so I encourage you to look around, but it's literally like a one-on-one counselor that you can formally hire, and they'll work with you on personal and impersonal things, professional goals, as well as maybe personal goals that you have in your life, because I think sometimes you'll find that those are very closely aligned. I think Trinh said something that I want to really capitalize on. Part of the mentorship, whether it's formal or informal, is the ability to articulate measurable goals or measurable outcomes. And one of the things that the executive coach taught to me was, when you immediately meet somebody and you have that opportunity to give them that 30-second overview about yourself, especially for those of us that have been in sales, it's really important to give them something measurable. I'm this person, I work on this team. I want you to know that last year, this was my team's goal, and we're at 150% of that number. That type of conversation isn't always the most natural to women. And I think that the sooner that you're comfortable amplifying the way that you've had success, some people call it boasting, but I think it's really amplifying your success. I think that's a really important skill that can come out of either, formal or informal mentorship.
Thank you, Christina. And I appreciate that you brought up the informational interviews. That's a concept that at one point I was introduced to me, and I realized I was doing, but maybe not in such a formalized way. And I think it was you who had shared with me a structure, an outline of actual questions that could be asked for that. I suggest, anyone on the line who's interested in that, you can Google, there's a very simple format for it. We can also go ahead and send out some examples to folks who had attended this, but it's a nice way to sort of overcome some of that, the maybe unnatural tendencies of asking some questions by having an actual invitation about the purpose of the conversation. So thank you for bringing that up. And really quickly, I want to go back to Trinh about the outcomes and moving into some of these informal mentorships, and what you're seeing as the outcome of the program that you put into place, if some of those folks have started to carry on those conversations and mentorships.
Yeah, so just briefly, I'll go through some of the outcomes we captured in terms of like career path, right? We saw, rattle this off real fast, a 29% increase in what they thought that they knew about where they wanted to go pre-program versus post-program. I think things like that, where they see where they fit in the organization and where our own department fits in the larger county, and even where the county fits in the larger picture, I think really starts to see them come out of their silo. So I think that's really important. I think having a formal mentorship program can really certainly pave the way for relationships to form that may not have otherwise. What I heard a lot from our mentees throughout and even after our program was that they feel now that they can reach out to their mentors even after the program is over, and they feel like they have a long-term mentor. And I think that's really important when you talk about mentorship. I think somebody said this earlier in terms of having relationships, right? And it really is up to the mentees to develop those relationships and to carry those forth. I think so having that formal piece of it, I think, is important, because people shy away from, oh, we've got, I want to be mentored, or I want to start a mentoring program. And there seems to be so many pieces to it, and they get shy about asking, maybe an executive, hey, can you be my mentor? But I think there's so much value in that once this program is over, for it to be sustained in very informal ways, right? And so I've certainly also had a lot of people in my professional life who I consider informal mentors. And there's value in that for sure. But the whole point, whether it's formal or informal, is really to have that person in your professional life who can kind of guide you through challenging times. Because we've all been there. We've all kind of got through these obstacles, just different angles of it. And it'd be nice to share that information.
Yeah, thank you. So next I want to talk about the difference. There are a few things that I want to address logistically around mentorship, the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. But I also want to point out, there was a comment that came through in our chat around educational disparity. So thank you. I see Mohammed, he's one of the few with their camera on, so thank you for sending that through. Certainly important to consider that as well. We're talking a lot about mentorship within the career space. I think we also want to talk about the value and importance of creating a pipeline. That's one of the goals of the Women in Tech program, of course. And if we'll also try to address that within our conversation today about how mentorship or mentoring young people can help encourage people to pursue careers or pursue formal education within some of these more non-traditional technology fields like computer science, data science, and those fields. So moving into the question around mentorship versus sponsorship and what the difference is there, we'll keep that in mind and throughout the conversation bring that up. So I want to start with Sharon on this next question. Can you discuss the difference between mentorship and sponsorship and how they've both been impactful in your career? I think for many people, they don't actually know what the difference is and how different the impacts of each could be.
Sure, thanks, Rebecca. And I want to thank Mohammed as well for his comment. It's a incredibly important thing to focus on. This starts with girls. And usually when I talk about this, I share a visual, but I have a daughter, she's 3 years old. And I took a picture of 2 diapers next to each other, and one had rockets and one had hearts. And one was marketed for boys and had a boy on the box, and one was marketed for girls and had a girl on the box. So, this starts really early when you're choosing diapers. So I bought her the rockets, and she loves the rocket diapers. So, whenever you're interacting with a girl, you can change a conversation with a girl. We all have opportunities, and it starts that young. And yes, there's formal things, Mohammed, through elementary school. Cisco's very involved with elementary schools, making sure we have exposure. We could probably do a whole hour-long panel on that, but I'm very passionate about it, and I appreciate that you brought it up in this forum, Mohammed. So let's switch gears to mentorship and sponsorship. What really got me thinking about this was actually a woman named Carla Harris. She's a vice chairman of wealth management and a senior client advisor at Morgan Stanley. She has several talks out there on YouTube, many things she's written. She is a African-American female in the banking industry, and so has had to overcome a lot of challenges just by the way the history of the banking industry. And she speaks a lot about when she was in her late 20s, she really had this aha moment that if she really wanted to excel in wealth management and executive leadership at Morgan Stanley, she really had to pave that trail herself and build sponsors above her to advocate for her behind closed doors, because she realized that a lot of these decisions on promotions or leadership happen behind closed doors where she wasn't at the table. So she realized she needed to influence stakeholders that were at the table behind those closed doors that were making the decisions. And so that's what got me thinking about sponsorship as something very different than mentorship. Mentorship is about growth, curiosity, development, understanding your blind spots, being able to be vulnerable, developing a trust with someone that's ready to invest in you. I see sponsorship as a logical outcome of a mentorship where after you've proven yourself to that mentor, you ask them to be your sponsor, which means, will you advocate for me? Do you believe in me in this next role? Do you believe in me for this next leadership position? And will you make calls on my behalf and be a stakeholder on my behalf when I'm not in the room? So I think it's really important to think about how you're building. I call it my board of directors, but it's basically a stakeholder network. Build your own board of directors, build your stakeholders, your board of trusted confidants who you can count on to help you navigate your career and advocate for you. I'll end on a story. I received this role about 8 months ago, and I did not have all of the government experience required that some of the other candidates had, and that was a key piece of the role was amount of government experience. And although I brought a wealth of other skills to the table, some of the other candidates had more experience doing business with government entities than I did, which was totally fair. I had a sponsor at the table talking about my skills, how I could learn this business, how I could learn what happens with these types of customers. And because of his advocation, I was able to receive this role. So I have a real personal recent example of someone advocating for me and making sure my other skills were brought to the table as equally as government experience was. So this can really matter, and it can really change the trajectory of your career and your life.
Thank you. And I want to get a perspective from someone in public sector. So I'm going to ask the same question of Mirian, because I think there's often a bit of hesitancy when we talk about sponsorship and then talk about it in relation to government. There's this idea of, oh no, what, is that fair to have people advocating, or is that fair that anyone would build a board of their own personal board of directors and in their sponsors? So I'd love to hear, Miriam, your experience and how that sort of presents itself within the public sector realm, and how that sort of can continue to enhance a career.
I think it's really important for mid-career individuals or women that are in mid-career roles to build that board of directors. I feel like that was key for my moving up to the C position, because I was able to sort of not necessarily within the county is big, not necessarily within your department, but having that ability to say, these are the folks that I'm going to need for references, for really practical things, like, who's going to be speaking on my behalf when I do apply for this position, who's going to be saying, these are the great projects that I've done. So having that ability to build those public sector sponsors, they're not necessarily advocating for you, but they are someone that you can rely on, which is really important, and really bounce off, does this look like a good opportunity for me to make the next move? So those kind of relationships across the board. I mean, I had a relationship with a couple of the CIOs from LA County when I decided that maybe it's time to join the county, and I had really frank conversations of what it was like to join the county as a CIO. And, I benefited from those type of relationships. And, it was so far, a different sector, a different county that I was coming from. And so it was just really important to have that, network of sponsors. And you can do that, but in a number of ways, because I think the practical thing is that if you're in a mid-career public sector organization, you sometimes, you're working on your day-to-day stuff, you feel sort of isolated. And the question is, how do you go beyond your bubble? There's a lot of, Rebecca, you're really good at this, but there's a lot of platforms that you use in order to be able to say, hey, you're doing a similar role in a similar county like I am. Maybe we should connect on LinkedIn, and sort of have that relationship outside. Because the reality is, we don't, in mid-career, in the middle of your career, you don't have that ability to go beyond the conferences or be able to network like we do in the C position, in the CIO position, where we're really forward facing and having those abilities to go outside. So to speaking to Sharon's point, she talks about in the private sector, you have that ability to network. In the public sector, it's a little bit more insular. And so how do you do that? How do you go beyond that? And so I think what's worked for me is obviously working on the platforms that like LinkedIn and other platforms that sort of have the professional profile. So that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw that Bart called me from a group chat. So Teams is active.
There.
I keep
Someone enjoying our chat. So Mirian, I think you make some really great points around that importance to have connection. And I don't know if this was intentional, but it's a perfect lead into our next question, because we want to talk about the value to an individual as well as an organization. And when you're talking about sponsorship, and it particularly struck me when you were talking about being able to speak to people who've been in that role or been in similar roles, and how important that is, not just for you to know, but for the organization. So you can make a educated decision on whether you are the right fit for that role, whether it now is the right time for you to pursue that role, or what other skills you need to get there. And this applies, I think, at any level within an organization to prepare yourself. But you're doing yourself a disservice if you aren't prepared by knowing that. And the organization is doing a disservice if they aren't transparent with some of the information, some of the challenges that you may face, and hopefully some of the successes that you would have in that role by personally bringing your own skills. So I'm going to move on and actually ask that question of a couple of our panelists. I'll start with Christina and just ask, what have you seen in terms of the positive impact to not just yourself, we talked a bit about that already, but to your organization in terms of mentorship? And there was actually a comment that came through, and we'll ask the same question of Trinh after. One of the participants as a mentor in the program at ISD spoke about the value that they received from being a mentor and being part of that in an organization. So have you seen something similar as well?
Well, I think I feel very fortunate to be at Accenture right now. 500,000 employees globally. We're going to hire another 100,000 employees. And we have very publicly stated some of our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. And we've now made them the fabric of our agency. And I think what that does is it speaks to these types of mentorship opportunities that we have, as well as we are encouraged to be involved in our communities, to get involved, in this sort of organization. It's part of what we're weaving in and making it part of our value statement. And I think that's really important as you look at sort of this next wave. There's a lot of people retiring. We are definitely at that inflection point that we heard about where the baby boomers were going to retire. We are here. It's happening right now. And in order for us to attract that next generation of talent, part of our values have to be that, we are looking at mentorship as the very foundation of what we do, right? So we are a place that values involvement in the community. We are a place that wants to have diverse people. And when we have diverse candidates, we cast a wider net. It creates a pipeline for us. I think that we also bring a diversity of ideas because we have diverse perspectives. So I think sort of at the macro level, this is the way that Accenture approaches. There's women's organizations, there's ethnic organizations that you can be a part of. There's just a variety of groups to be involved in. I think on a personal level, one example I'll give, and I think this is really important, Stephanie touched on it a few minutes ago, is, as women, we will get an opportunity to look at a job description and we will say, ooh, 20% of that, I don't know that. That doesn't, and we will talk ourselves out of applying for that job. Men are better at looking at that and going, I could do that job. And that is a narrative that a mentor taught me to change. Like 20%, you could learn that. And Stephanie talked about that, how, she might have not had, these other things, but it was her advocate, right, that said, but she could learn these things. I had a similar situation in getting in this role. There were people that were far more technical than me that interviewed for the job, but they also didn't have the public sector health, the ability to bring teams together, the ability to build diverse teams. So these are important lessons that I think, a mentor can provide. And I always learn a lot, especially from younger mentees, in terms of, how are they using social media to connect and collaborate, right? Because, I tend to I'm in the business, I'm in technology, and I'm often astounded by I didn't even know such a tool existed. So I think, there's an opportunity for sort of two-way learning. And it's really beneficial to me right now because I have a sophomore in college that is soon going to be a young woman in the workforce. And, I want to learn from her as much as I'm hoping I can impart on her. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Christina. And, I like that you actually brought up some of your own strong skills and mention those, because you're encouraging us all to sort of have a comfort level with talking about those. So if anyone wants to share in the chat what sets them apart, what makes them special in the workforce, and start advocating, be comfortable with that, drop that in the chat. And if you aren't comfortable putting that in the chat, just start thinking about what are some of those things that really set you apart. So you can be comfortable. I think the more you talk about it, the more comfortable you are. Karen, I do see that you have a hand raised. I just want to make sure, did you have was that inadvertent little use of?
No, I answered the question in the chat. I was just responding to Mohammed's question around, what the group is doing with education. What is it that we're doing with our mentoring program? And really, the WiT LA is really looking at all of these factors, right? And I so appreciate all of my sponsors, and I see my executives are on the call as well. So I really appreciate all of the participation and really information and excitement around what it is that we're doing. I think that, again, it takes a village, and it's going to take all of us to kind of reach back into the community to see, what the young girls are doing, even young boys who may not be exposed to the technology because of, again, we've got the whole, digital divide and all of these things. So it's not just, one thing fits for everyone, but we're needing to reach back into that community, because the way that I see it is those are going to be the feeder folks who are going to come in and be the next county workforce. I love what you said earlier about, again, that next generation. We're losing, we're at the end of the baby boomers. We're on to, Gen Xers, and now the Gen Xers are leaving. So as a county family, we really need to look at how are we going to replace those skills? How are we going to replace those management skills? And I think, this is just one angle, because we need to mentor our own, and then we need to also reach back into the community and make sure that the folks who are coming up, who may be our feeder systems, also have, equal opportunity as well.
That's really important, Karen. I think I know it's a very simple concept, but I've heard before, you can't be what you can't see. So if you haven't seen that demonstrated to you, if you haven't seen people in certain roles, you wouldn't even know that it's possible. And as Sharon was talking about, making sure she purchased the rocket ship diapers as opposed to the sort of traditional girly ones. I even forget which ones, because the rocket ship sounded so much cooler. I forgot what the other ones were. It actually reminded me of, and I'm going to date myself a little bit, I was interested in being an astronaut for many years. I realized later that actually was not the right path for me, and I went a different direction, but I had a lot of interest in being an astronaut. And that was really was driven by the Challenger, and not the explosion of the Challenger, but the program that the Challenger had, which brought the space program back into schools in the interest of exposing kids in schools to that, and also picking someone from the public, a teacher, to be engaged in that program. And that alone really made people realize how accessible something can be. Seemingly it was sort of anyone can do this. Of course, the people who were chosen were science teachers and had a number of skills. They weren't just sort of anyone off the street. However, it really encouraged a number of people to consider things like that. And so once people start seeing the demonstration of different roles, whether it's through a school program or through a national program, that really makes a difference. So I appreciate you talking about that pipeline and demonstrating some of those roles. Quickly, I want to jump back to Trinh, because I do appreciate the comment that one of your participants from the program, I think John Neal, had about the value that he got from participating as a mentor in the program. And I want to see if you could just quickly share other value that you saw to your organization, and not just to the individual level, from having a mentorship program launched. And I know it's still early, so tracking some of those goals is a little bit tough. But what else have you seen in terms of value to the organization?
So I just want to jump back real fast to somebody, I think it was Sharon, who had talked about the the soft skills that she learned from one of her mentors and includes how you enter a room, etc. You know, when I first started
Christina, actually, sorry, I have to give props.
Christina. Sorry, Christina.
Notes on that one too. So
yeah. Yeah, Christina. And I think those things are so important because they're very subtle, right? So when I first started looking at how do we do a mentorship program, even just again around WiT, around our women workforce, at the end of the day, I work for the county, and you know you probably can't do something like that. So we ended up having again half of our mentorship program men and women. But you know, now looking back post program, there was such a value to that because you can talk about women issues and you can talk about all the things that we face as women and bring awareness to it with our men workforce, right? And so when we're all there talking about the same things, I think it brings a lot of empathy. You know, and again, subtle things like I've witnessed and I've experienced throughout my career where I can walk into a room, be part of a technical discussion, but there's always somebody who may look at me and be a little bit dismissive of my opinions, or because whether that's just me or because I'm a woman, but regardless, those kind of subtle things matter, right? And so bringing those things to light and having discussions around them, I think it benefits both men and women. So I think again, I think Mirian's point is it's a two-way learning with that, right? So I think that in itself, the awareness of that is positive for the organization. Again, I think we talked about, you know, my own program has been fairly new. So we haven't been able to kind of track, and then for the most part since then we've been kind of remote. So it's hard to really kind of gauge and see the kind of bigger collective impact. But I can say from my kind of personal experiences with my own mentees, certainly the immediate impact is that our mentees' perception of, you know, quote unquote management, right? We're not some kind of just unrelatable figurehead with, you know, but so with the relationships that have been established through this mentorship program, I think it has brought a very kind of human element to how we interact with each other. So I've noticed a lot less hesitancy when from my mentees and interacting with the people who they previously had perceived to be people you don't talk to and people you don't approach. So I think I've also seen some of my mentees really come out of their shell and take a little bit more risk, and putting them outside of their comfort zone, really kind of grabbing opportunities where they see them. So I'm hopeful that that same thing is happening with all the other mentees from the program, because I think, you know, collectively you could do that. I think that drive would really just change any organization.
Yeah, and of course you are an incredibly large organization, even by the scale of LA County, a large organization. And so having that exposure and having people just have a comfort level and sort of a reason maybe to speak to people, like we were saying, that sort of sometimes that formal program can just overcome that small obstacle of having a reason to connect with someone. So I think that's great. I'm glad that you're seeing so many benefits come out of that. And I'm super excited to see how it continues to grow and evolve as well. So we are getting toward the end of our time. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We're having some great conversations in the chat, and I think we're all keeping an eye on those. If you have any questions for the panelists, let us know. Otherwise, I'd like to do a quick round robin for all of our panelists. And the same question actually will go out to all of our attendees too, if you have something you'd like to share. I'd like each of our panelists to be able to share, if we haven't already covered it, a particular characteristic that's great to see in a mentor, or that you particularly appreciate in a mentor, and then also a resource that and we've already named quite a few in terms, we've had informational interviews and different books and resources that were posted into the chat. But if you have a particular resource that's been useful for you, or just even an experience that you want to recommend, please let us know. So I will start with, on the top of my screen anyway, Christina.
Sure. I put in the chat an article that I just came across yesterday that's from the Harvard Business Review about not just mentoring, but sponsoring. I think it's really good. There's a wonderful TED Talk that I love watching that is about presence in how you walk into your room. I will put it in the chat because I can't think of the lady. It's been around for a really, really long time, and I think it's great. And certainly anytime that, you know, I can grab a good book on tape, or a 30-minute podcast. There's some great ones out there that I'll put in the chat that I enjoy. But the number one thing I look for personally is a person to be inquisitive. I think to stay in technology and to stay relevant, you have to be curious. And I am drawn to people who are also curious and ask a lot of questions. So that's important to me.
And I know he was on the line at the beginning. Ben Lee, who's the CIO for the library, he would recommend you don't have to do books on tape anymore.
Oh, sorry.
You can just check them out for free from the LA County Library and download them right onto your phone. I do it all the time.
See, I sound like a dinosaur. I sound like a dinosaur saying that.
I'm joking. Some of the terms that we just gravitate toward, but I joke because I love my LA County library app. So. Next, we will go to, let's see, Trinh. You have a characteristic and a resource to recommend.
So characteristic of a good mentor. I thought about this a lot because you can actually do some harm, I think, also if you're not a good mentor because you have like a close and some influence over your mentees. I think just listening would be the number one characteristic. But then also not taking it on yourself to be your problem to solve. Versus really I ask a lot of my mentees, okay, so they bring a challenge to me and said, okay, so, tell me your thought process around something, and then kind of guide them rather than saying, hey, this is what you got to do. You got to do step A, B, and C, right? And so I think just generally, again, you got to put that ownership back onto them, and being able to do that, can be hard sometimes because some of us are like, let me solve it, right? And so we got to step back a little bit and let that be a learning process for them. I think that's really important. And then for the mentees, I think we started our program as a voluntary. Anyone who wanted to be mentored volunteered for it. And honestly, it can't be mandated. So the number one thing for mentees is their curiosity and their thirst and their want to grow and learn. I think that's it, right? That's all you can. That's everything that you can expect. I don't have a particular resource. I just, again, we dealt with a lot of topics in our mentorship program. And so where there's a topic around that, I mean, I'll Google everything, right? And so it was a collection of stuff. And what we found helpful was we had a Teams site set up for our mentors. And then the mentees had their own, so they can collaborate and share ideas and maybe complain about their mentors or whatever. But I found that to be really helpful because your peers sharing information with peers around what they found helpful. And then, I'm sure the mentees did the same.
Yeah, a very simple solution, but allowing people the ownership to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Great. Mirian, do you have a resource and a skill that you value?
Yeah, so from a mentor, I'm looking for just the ability to really, I like to always ask people, what are things that you would do differently? What are your mistakes? Because I think that when people are candid about the course corrections in their career they would have done, that just teaches you something about things that you should avoid. And so I'm always looking for an honest mentor who really doesn't tell me all the highlights and the high points, like this is all the great things I've done, but these are all the really dumb things that I've done in my career that I should have avoided. So trying to be able to understand and learn from people's mistakes is always great. It's just something that I like to do.
Absolutely.
And so from a very practical perspective, I think just constantly looking at really short programs to enhance your skill sets that you could go and do. And depending on where you are in your career, early on in your career, just those certificates and collecting those certificates. And especially nowadays where everything's virtual. And if you're a working parent, because we didn't talk about the whole working parent public sector, but being able to have that, I'm going to, in the next 6 months, I'm going to work on these technical skills. And depending if you're in mid going to the advanced, to leadership positions, Christina talked a lot about the soft skills, and those are the things that as technical people and as women in technology, we have tried to repress as quick as possible, because you want to be taken seriously, you want to be known as a tech person, and you don't focus on the soft skills, and later on and as you advance further up, those are actually the most important things that we kind of have to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And really quickly, Sharon, if you could.
I will be quick.
Yeah, I was just grabbing it.
Okay, skill for a mentor. I think you need to be able to give feedback well. So don't be afraid of difficult conversations. Don't be afraid to tell someone what they need to hear. As a mentee, be able to take feedback well, hear it, incorporate it, and don't take it personally. And then as a resource, I like the book, The Startup of You. It was written by the founder of LinkedIn, actually, and it just helps you think of yourself and your career more like an entrepreneur. Be nimble, self-reliant, innovative, know how to network, and know how to stand out from a crowd. The Startup of You.
Thank you so much. So, and we will have the chat open for just another minute or so. If anyone else has suggestions they want to throw in there, or any other skills or characteristics they think make a good mentor, please put those in there. I will wrap this up now. We are just a few minutes over the end of our time, but I want to thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining this session. Our goal was for you to leave this session with an understanding the value of mentorship, particularly for women in technology at all levels of their career, and some of the mentorship activities taking place in the county now. So hopefully you may have an opportunity to join some of those, or maybe be inspired to launch a program yourself. So I hope we've met those goals. Thank you to Women in Tech at Los Angeles. Thank you, Karen. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to moderate this session today. WiT is a new organization at LA County, open to engagement from all LA County employees. So I think we're all looking forward to how the organization grows and evolves and meets the goals that they've set out. So please keep an eye out for future events and ways to engage and support the needs of all of our county's technologists. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Thank you.